contributing to today's Premier League Today by the medium of song. Ian Wright, who's here as always on a Friday, and Raphael Honigstein. Okay, we'll let you talk your way through it. We'll start with the big game. It is Manchester City against Chelsea, which gives us a chance to reflect from City's perspective. We will come to Arsenal's perspective on the defeat last night for them. But the win for Manchester City, how significant was that, coming after the trophy against the same side with what could have been a difficult match for them?
Yeah, it could have been, but unfortunately it wasn't, simply because I feel that City are so much the superior team that even if Arsenal did find something in their armoury where they could have tried to curtail City, it wouldn't have happened. You look at the way Leroy Sane, again, you know, another player who stepped up, had a hand in all 3 goals. He was literally unplayable. The way they played, they are in finishing this season off mode. They're in getting this done, and you can see how brilliant they were. That for me was a beautiful goal. With Silva's touch was superb, and again, you know, Arsenal trying to press, they're not quite got it right. The touch might have been a bit fortunate there for Aguero, but it runs for him. And then in the end, you've got Leroy Sane. Hector's trying to get across, but it's all going for them, you see. They are just playing brilliant football. They've got total belief in what they're doing and total confidence. It's a joy to watch, to be honest.
It would have been understandable if Pep Guardiola, you couldn't really see the conditions in the television footage, but the snow was swirling around the stadium. It was freezing cold. They just played a cup final. They've got the game against Chelsea to come at the weekend. You'd have understood if Pep Guardiola had said, I'm going to rest some of the players, but he only made 2 changes, and one of those was enforced and the other one was the goalkeeper. What does that say about his determination to keep this machine ticking?
Well, I think he wants to send a message to his own team that this is not over until it's over, and we should not lose our intensity, our urgency, play as well as we can, and then, you know, maybe rest when it's done. And I think against Arsenal, especially with the League Cup only a couple of days ago, they felt there was a reaction coming. And I think he was prepared for Arsenal to be asking questions, pushing them hard. He had a very uncomfortable evening there with Bayern Munich, I remember a few years ago, where Arsenal, before they missed a penalty with Mesut Ozil, were the better team and really threatened to knock Bayern out. So I think he was paying a lot of respect to Arsenal, but also sending a message to his side that we cannot quite afford to start, you know,
easing off,
resting players, making changes just for the sake of keeping everybody happy.
And that's exactly what Pep Guardiola has been talking about ahead of this game against Chelsea.
I give a lot of credit to win that game because we can maintain the 16 points in front, and we need 5 more games to be champion. So it was so important for us. So big congratulations for the players, but it's never easy. Win a title, always you can think a little bit more relaxed, or you are not focused like teams like Arsenal deserves to be. And we were, and that's why so far we make an amazing Premier League season. So there's no doubt about that. Now it's Chelsea, the last champion, and we just 3 days recovery. So we're going to see what's happening in the lineup. It doesn't matter who plays, try to beat them, because everything is done when it's already done. You are champion when you are champion. When you still need 50 points, you are not. And the football can say, it's impossible. Okay, yeah. We won a lot of games. We just lost 1. We have to lose 5. Of course, but why not? Can happen. In football can happen absolutely everything.
Yeah, they do need 15 points to absolutely guarantee the title, but a win against Manchester United in the derby on April the 7th would pretty much seal it for Manchester City, which would be the earliest time that anyone had ever won the Premier League title if Manchester United slip up between now and then. In terms of Guardiola talking about maintaining that intensity, is it important that they do that in every game? Are there any between now and the end of the season where he can afford to just take his foot off a little bit, or would that be a dangerous habit?
I don't think so, especially when you listen to what he said there about, you know, they need to lose 5, or they've only lost 1 and they need to lose 5. I think that the message I get from him speaking like that is that he's literally got those players totally focused on the next game and making sure that they are playing to their best in every game, because for some reason he's speaking like somebody's been burnt by that before. You know, that nothing's done until it's done, and we all know that anyway. But for a Manchester City team who are so dominant this season, you could excuse him maybe a little bit of, calming down a little bit, maybe. I wouldn't say calming down for want of a better word, but no, not in Pep's eyes, because I think that he knows that they've got the League Cup, that's done, the league is going to be done, and they still need to kick for the Champions League as well, because you can't tell me they haven't got a very good chance in that, the way they're playing.
And maybe the reason he's talking about having been burned before is because, to a certain extent, it has happened before.
Yeah, I mean, they won the league ridiculously early 3 times in the Bundesliga with Bayern. And every time he started making wholesale changes, resting players, and they lost their intensity completely. Of course, you don't know if that is the reason why they failed to get into the final, got knocked out in the semi-final 3 times against very decent sides. We don't know. The problem for him was then when he did rest players, they lost a bit of the rhythm, the intensity. But when he played some of the big players in those meaningless games and they got injured, he felt really guilty. He's saying, I lost one of my biggest players here in the meaningless games, and I'm going to miss them in the Champions League. So I think he was always in between in 2 minds. And Pep, despite his sometimes very confident and prickly demeanour, is a guy who second guesses himself all the time. He has a lot of questions to himself. He does doubt his decision making. Now, I really am curious to see on what side of the line he's going to come down on. Is he going to say, I want to protect my players because I need them, they're so key to me when it comes to the quarterfinals, the semi-finals in the Champions League? Or will I try and play more or less the best side throughout the season? It's going to be fascinating.
I get the impression, Raf, that he's going to literally take each game as it comes because of the Champions League. He wants them to still be intense in every single game.
Every single game and every minute of every game. I mean, as much as they were 3-0 up against Arsenal at half-time, even in the second half, he was on the touchline and he was driving Manchester City forward, trying to make changes to what they were doing on the pitch. And afterwards, he said, they play like they did between 35 and 65 minutes in Europe. They're going to get punished for it.
He's a perfectionist. I mean, he drives people crazy in training because he's so demanding, especially in the Premier League. Players are not really used to training that hard. Training is regeneration. Training is getting ready for the next game, but not really to the extent that you come off and feel like, oh my God, this was a terrible workout and I have a real headache from all these tactical instructions he's given me. But that's who he is. And I think that without that attention to detail, without him saying, you know what, in minute 55 you misplaced the ball, we wouldn't see players playing at that level because this is something, again, I don't want to be talking about Bayern Munich all day, but this is something that they learned once he left. Little by little, they lost that commitment to taking up the right positions, to playing the right passes, to being disorganized. And if you don't reinforce that all the time, every single time, in games, in training, you lose it. And I think that is a lesson that he has learned as a manager, that you just cannot let up, even if it drives people mad at the end of the day.
Leroy Sane was talking about exactly that after the game last night. He said in training, he sees things in players that other coaches haven't seen, and he works on bringing it out on them. And we've seen this season the improvement in him, but last night seemed to be the peak of Sane's season.
I think that what's happened with Man City, we've seen how great De Bruyne has been this season. Silva goes without saying, Sterling started, and now it seems like it's Leroy Sane's turn. But what you see with him is everything. He's got everything. He's another player from the wing that wants to get in the box. He's got unbelievable pace and skill. Mustafi can't get near him. He doesn't know if to show him inside, outside. He can go both ways. That touch again, I can't stop seeing it. Can't stop loving it. And then when you look at how wide he's kept Ectabella in here, and then you see he actually ends up inside him. It's just his desire and drive to get in there. Now look, brilliant stuff. It's just, like I say, he's just another player with Manchester City that you have to try and keep quiet. They've got so many players who are playing well, and he's another one that's gone, he's playing even better. So it's just another player and another weapon in their armoury, which is hurting teams.
So if all the teams around them win their remaining fixtures between now and the next 5 games for Manchester City, City could win it officially on April the 14th. But it's also possible that they could win it before then, if the teams below them slip up. They've got a chance to beat Chelsea, who won't be one of the teams really who'll be challenging Manchester City not challenging them, but stopping them from winning the title early. Stoke, Everton, but the Manchester United game as their nearest challengers, it's just going to be huge as well, isn't it? Yeah,
I think it's. I think still tomorrow in the way they play. and the way they've been playing, to beat Chelsea, which I think they probably will do, will give them even more confidence to kick on into those games. Because let's face it, whatever happens in the Manchester game, you know, it's still, for me, it's a big game. It won't really matter what happens. Man United can only maybe try and draw or halt it. But when you look at the rest of the games that's coming up, it's just a foregone conclusion for me.
This game this weekend is an interesting one from both managers' perspective, because there are real similarities between them, Raf.
I think the intensity that they bring to the game tactically, but also the man management, is very similar. I think after a while it can be maybe wearing teams and players down. I think there's a reason why maybe after 3 or 4 years we've seen these managers move on. I think with Conte you could already feel it this year at times that perhaps the team are finding it hard to have that kind of intensity. I think their man management is also a little bit cold, relatively speaking. You know, they're interested in the players, but perhaps not so much in the human beings. They don't really put arms around people that much. Pep always talks about technically improving players, but perhaps doesn't have that connection that other managers have. And I think Conte is also, from what I'm hearing, is quite a removed figure. Players respect him and respond to both of these guys because they feel that their methods are working and they feel that they're having success, and every single one of them is by and large doing well in their system. But of course the playing style is very, very different, and that is also reflected, I think, in the training methods. With Conte, it's very much without the ball, lots of shape work, lots of organisation, very rigid. With Pep, I think it's more about constant movement, taking up position, thinking about spaces rather than the opposition so much, and it's reflected, of course, in the way these teams play.
I think, Raf, what's interesting is when Leroy Sane is saying he picks up little things in your game. When you've got a manager or a coach, remember, George Graham was good at it as well, finding something that you should work on and then you getting the benefits of it very, very quickly. But when you've got players of that caliber who a manager then tells them something and they find it in their game and then they work on it and it works, you literally work as hard as he wants you to work because you know that you're improving. And like when you look at all the players, it's just that Leroy Sane now is the next one that we're seeing massive improvement in. And you listen to Vincent Kompany talking about the intensity and how much he asks of you. It must be an unbelievable environment to be working in, and quite enjoyable when you're working that hard, but it's positive and technical and all offensive stuff. I had to do a lot of that stuff, but it was all defensive with Arsenal and George Graham.
You look like you loved it.
I didn't love it at all, Kels, and we've spoke about it on many occasions, but I totally understand why the players are just embracing it so much.
Well, while Pep Guardiola has been talking about Manchester City chasing the title, Antonio Conte has been talking about Chelsea chasing fourth.
As I said before, for us now in this moment, we have to try to get a place in Champions League, and it won't be easy. Because there are many teams very strong, and we must be ready to fight. We must be ready to fight and to try to take a place, to get a place for the next season in Champions League.
Well, as well as Antonio Conte did last season, and as much credit as he got last season, they've only won 4 of their 14 games since the turn of the year. They're outside the Champions League places. How important is it for Chelsea to qualify in the Champions League, not just for Champions League football next season, but because there are rumblings about a couple of their top players as well?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely huge. They have to be in the Champions League. There's always rumours, there's always a bit of disquiet at Chelsea, but if you don't get into the Champions League, that would be considered a real failed season. And it's hard to know, who's to blame if you want to talk in these terms, because Conte from the beginning, even before the season started, was unhappy with the level of investment, with the kind of players that were brought to him. And it's very hard to say it's his fault or it's the board's fault, but certainly you felt it wasn't really the perfect harmonious setup. And I think by and large, Chelsea have done well enough. It's just that the teams around them, the teams that were below them last season, have all improved, and Chelsea are more or less where they were before. They've lost a couple of players, they brought in a couple of players, but they are kind of on the same plateau, which is still very, very high. But these other teams, certainly Man City, certainly Man United, and certainly Liverpool, have all improved.
And you look at it and you feel like even with the number 9, the focal point with Morata, the way he started the season, it's really strange that somebody who's come in and you talk about, like people talk about maybe the winter breaks affected him, or the coming to a new league. But like he started so well, and it's really strange that you start that well and it falls off like it has for him. I watched him in the game against United, and he had moments where you're thinking, okay, that was really good sharp play, and then that was very sloppy play. And you think to yourself, you're not sure what's happening with him. This one, you see, this is sharp play. Anything, the ball may be coming back a little bit, he gets something. This one, watch his movement here. Great move, look at him, he's intense, he's getting in there, he's got in there, he's hit the bar. If that goes in, it's a whole different story for him. This is where you think to yourself, well, just lay that back into Ashwell or Danny Drinkwater, I should say, and get yourself back in there. Those are the things that he should be focusing on. He's just fractionally offside here. I think that he knows it. Well, he's done, but then you look and you think to yourself, this is not bad. That's the intensity you want from him in all aspects of his game at the moment. That's what they need. That's what you get with Costa. Now, I'm not saying he should be a Costa, but I feel that with his ability, and you're seeing it in spasms there, that he is capable of putting in the kind of work and the runs that can get Chelsea the goals that they need. Because I think if he can do that, Chelsea will be in the top 4.
But I think every centre forward has their up and downs during the season, and even with Costa, it was very pronounced that there were like weeks and months where he didn't look on it. I think with Chelsea, it's exacerbated because centre forwards don't get that much of the ball. So when you have 3 or 4 opportunities, and for whatever reason you're not quite on it, then it looks as if you weren't in the game at all, because you don't get a lot of touches in midfield, you don't really provide a lot of assists. And I think that's why it's harder also for them to keep the confidence. You are so far removed from your teammates at times. I mean, United actually played quite deep, so it gave Chelsea an opportunity to push forward, but many times there's a centre forward and then there's Hazard and then there's no one. There's runners coming from 30 metres behind. I think it's really hard. And you still wonder if Morata, who wasn't the first choice for Conte, he wanted Lukaku, is the kind of centre forward that enjoys.
Is it a way to get the best out of Willian, though?
I think that Willian, whether he plays with himself, Pedro and Hazard, or if he has a focal point right up front, he still produces on a regular basis. And it's very surprising for me. I remember there was times this season where Bakayoko was playing in front of people like Willian, and I couldn't believe it. For somebody who's technically outstanding, he joins in, free kicks, every single aspect of the game he has. I cannot understand how he's somebody that is not involved even more. I can't believe he doesn't start certain games. When you look at him here, of course we say McTominay, and I'm sure he'll learn from that. He's got to continue to go with a player like that, and then he scores the goal. And he was the one in that game and in the games previously who is the main danger for them. And if he had somebody who he could maybe link up with, someone like Morata in that game, particularly so as he can bring Willian on, we might even see even more from Willian.
What about Hazard? When we talk about him so much, what's the best way to see the best of him in that game? Because there was talk of him maybe creating opportunities for Morata, but if Morata can't finish those chances, then it doesn't really help Hazard to look at his best. But does he work better in that 3, do you think?
Well, I think, first of all, every player always likes to have players around them. I think centre-backs like to play in a back 3 because it's easier. Centre-forwards like to play at least with 2 centre-forwards. 3, it's easier, it's nicer. But what I would say is I think Conte has managed to bring out the best of Hazard, certainly last season and in patches this season, because he plays in a more or less free role behind the centre-forward. And I think for him, that is a wonderful position to be in, because if you play him in a 3, okay, if he's in the middle, then he has a bit of freedom. But if he plays in a wide area, then we've seen how hard a time Mourinho had with him and always asked him to come back, and it's not really his game. As a second centre forward, player in the hole, however you want to define it, you have a bit more freedom, and you can sort of pick your moments and really have these decisive impact when you do touch the ball. And I think that's what Conte has done well. In a way, the pressure is further back in the team, and it's released Hazard to a certain extent. But it comes with a price because he's a little bit isolated at times. And if it, as you said, if it doesn't click with him and Morata, then as an attacking side, Chelsea kind of break down.
That's exactly right.
And also, if he's playing behind the striker, but there is no Morata, and he's the striker, it becomes a different role for him.
Yeah, because ideally you want Hazard getting on the ball with Morata in a more forward position. So as if he wants to turn it round the corner first time, then he lays it off. Then you've got someone like Hazard, and the same with Willian, where Morata then brings them into the game by being that point so as they can run without the ball, get on the ball. And then when they get it in the areas where they're running towards people, they cause all sorts of problems. And I believe that is Chelsea's most dangerous weapon to use. But obviously at the moment, Morata's not playing well enough to help that. But like you say with Hazard, fantastic in any system like that. But I would, if I'm playing against him, I'd love to see him up front on his own like that, because I believe that my team will be able to deal with him.
And as much as this is a big game for Manchester City, and we talked about the reasons why, for Chelsea, for them to be able to move back into the top four if other results go their way this weekend, it's a huge game for them.
It's a massive win. It could be if they could win this game, which I'm really I'm not sure that they can. But like, it's the kind of game where people will get up for it. You know, maybe it might be the game where Morata comes back to the form we saw earlier on the season. But I think it's the kind of game that will then give them the momentum and the impetus to kick on again. Because what you need to do, you need to put that pressure on Tottenham. You need to put the pressure on Tottenham, because them themselves, anything happens to Harry Kane, and then, you know, Chelsea have to be there to try and get on.
Yeah, but I think you can almost flip it, because if Chelsea get beaten, then I think fourth is slipping away from them very, very quickly. So I think they're under real pressure to get at least a draw, because the teams above them have easier games. And might be pulling away. And the Champions League might be gone as well next week. So I think it's a difficult week for them.
It is a big, difficult week for Chelsea. It is a hugely significant game coming up between Manchester City